A 19-year-old serving national service, two 78-year-olds, a 3-year-old and her 34-year-old father. These were some of the people who died from residential fires last year. And the spark that may have started these fires is showing no signs of abating anytime soon. Fires involving household content and electrical fires are on the rise. Each of us today have multiple electrical devices and they all need charging. So that often means overloading sockets each night as we sleep. And when a fire happens, it doesn't just put your family in danger. It also puts everyone around you at risk. Welcome to 2023 and to Heart of the Matter. My name is Stephen Chia and I'm your host. Today we want to get to the heart of residential fires in Singapore. What is the spark driving this? Who is ultimately responsible for safety and what might be missing in our understanding of residential fires? To help me dissect this issue are Benedict Koh, President of Fire Safety Managers Association, Singapore.
Hello, nice to be here.
Yong Teck Meng, National Director of Habitat for Humanity, Singapore.
Hi, Stephen. Hi, guys.
Tang Kok Zuea, we'll call him KZ, College of Design and Engineering.
Hello, hi.
All right, gentlemen, thanks for joining us online. Let's start the conversation. Unfortunately, this year is off to another bad start. In fact, there have been more fires happening. We just heard of one in East Coast where several homes were badly burned. We also heard of a power bank catching fire on a Scoot plane that was about to take off. So, Benedict, why are we seeing this trend of more residential fires, especially in recent years?
Actually, taking reference from the SCDF news release, the total number of fire incidents decreased actually by 1.8% in 2021, while the number of fire incidents in residential premises fell by 4.2%. But I do not have the data for 2022 at this moment because it's January, so it's a bit too early to have the compilation of the data.
But the impression is that there seem to be more fires happening. Okay, maybe the numbers don't show it, and I know we haven't got the latest figures yet. Teck Meng, what do you think? Is it just me, or do you feel that way too?
Surely one of the key problems is the use of all kinds of battery and battery-assisted devices. And the problem seems to be that these devices, many of which cannot pass the standard power and fire safety requirements, especially those that are bought on the chip. So it seems like many of these things are flooding the market. In the work that we do at Habitat for Humanity, we have seen many people living in flats with a lot of junk put in the house. And so you can imagine that if one of these things would catch fire in the middle of the night, it will quickly then spread to the whole place.
You've raised a few good points. We'll touch more on that. But first, I'll pick up on the fact that you're saying, there are a lot of alternatives to electrical devices. In fact, a few years back, those personal mobility devices, e-scooters, for instance, they were almost one a week we will hear about a fire. The authorities stepped in, regulated them, and that has eased up somewhat. But it still happens. Just in June 2021, we saw a young delivery rider who died when his PMD caught fire in the elevator. So KZ, would you say such mobility devices are no longer as much of a worry?
I would say it depends because as what Teck Meng has said, there are now more options available for the consumers in the market. It's quite hard for the authorities to really keep track each and every individual consumer, whether they would adhere to just buying the products from more of the established brands.
Okay, so it's the fact that we have all these options to buy the cheaper version of something. You buy a cheaper battery, an alternative phone charging wire. Is this really a big issue? Because if I go online and I shop, the original costs $100, the alternative costs $10. And I think to myself, well, most of the time nothing happens anyway, right? So Benedict, is this that false sense of security? It won't happen to me, it's fine.
Actually, it is because, to be very honest, we all know that you just need one fire, one incident out of 1,000 chargers. It's going to be a disaster. Charging of electrical appliances, like what KZ was mentioning, we should actually get all those approved items, equipments, appliances, even to the simple thing of extension cord. We should get the approved ones with the standard safety labels. These are very essential. But as for household fire, actually the highest in statistics for 2021 is actually unattended cooking. And it followed by fire of electrical origins. That's the second one. Of course, hoarding of contents in the house. This is the third. So fire of electrical origins is still on a very high in the list in that sense.
Yeah.
And right. Mainly come from non-approved equipment and items. Yeah.
May I add also that long time ago I used to be an electrical engineer, so I was in charge of power supply at one time. I have some understanding of the power safety issue. The other problem is that in order to get your approval rating and seal and the mark of approval for fire safety, the supplier has to go through a lot of processes and design in a lot of safety features, and therefore the product will be more expensive. So what's happening now is that other than non-approved one, you have fake stuff. People just slam the logo on the battery and claim that this is safe, but in reality they lack all these safety features. So it's a combination of buying fake goods which you don't know is fake, or you kind of know that it's fake, but because it's very cheap, so you don't quite care as well.
Yeah, it's true. I guess sometimes we want to feel like ignorance is bliss. I mean, I know for $10 it's not the real thing, but yet I kind of don't want to believe that it's not the real thing, So is this a danger then moving forward, that if there are all these fake devices there, are people just not willing to pay for the proper products? And how is that going to change? Because a lot of the stuff we buy online comes from overseas, so we can't control those coming in as well, right?
It is a real issue, actually. It's not just about these power devices, it's about everything, Like just yesterday, I saw this very young teenager guy vaping, and I realized that, hey, you could try to ban it all you want, but they seem to be able to get it quite easily by buying it off the internet. So I think this is an issue that is very tough to solve. And all these personal mobile devices with the batteries and power banks and all that, they're just coming from all corners. And the authorities, I do believe, are finding it very tough to deal with. And we're talking about fire that can cause death here. I'm assuming that they have really trying their best, and even as we speak, are trying to figure out how to really nip this in the bud. But I think it's a tough thing to solve.
Benedict, you look like you wanted to say something.
Oh yeah, actually what Teck Meng was saying also is very difficult to control. So on our side, I think we have to have these prevention measures, even on your electrical appliances, knowing that we may not know that mistakenly buying something that's not approved. We have to check our electrical system very regularly in that sense, because most of us, we move into the house, you stay for 10 years, 20 years, you don't even check your circuit breakers, whether it trip or doesn't. No? Actually, these are life-saving devices, because anything goes wrong with the electrical appliances, by right, the circuit breaker, be the MCB or the RCD, they will treat.
So let me ask you, Benedict, because you're right. I happened to be speaking to an electrician recently, and he told me, I have a license to kill. I was like, huh? Yeah, because he's a licensed electrician, and if he doesn't do his work properly, people can die.
Yes, correct.
But we forget that, right? So in terms of rewiring my home so that it doesn't have the possibility of leading to a fire, what would you tell people out there? How often should we do it? If it's a 20-year home, 30, 50, some of us haven't changed wiring in 50 years.
So basically, if you go by manufacturer's recommendation, electrical cables should be replaced after 20 years. You have a lifespan about 20, 25 years. So it depends on the quality. And these days, unfortunately, again, similar to other appliances, they're able to get cheap cables in, inferior quality. That's another issue that we are facing at this moment.
Oh no, so even if I rewire my home and it's only 5 years old, the wiring may have already,
So it's better to make sure that you get a trustable contractors, electrical contractors, to give you so-called good quality products in that sense, yeah.
Right. I recently learned again from another story of a talking point that we should be using licensed electricians.
Correct. It's licensed,
but
you should use LEW to do the job and not just any other so-called contractors in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, the thing is, it sometimes looks so easy, right? I've changed lights at home before on my own. Of course, I got a big scolding from my wife, because I did trip the house several times. So that was a one-off thing. Yeah, in terms of the way our homes are designed, many of them are quite old. Have they been equipped to kind of take on the electrical loads that we require as people today with all our many devices?
With the new devices that homeowners may purchase over the time, we should read the manual carefully to understand, what are the safe conditions that in which the devices are made to be used safely.
Right, but that's the device. I'm saying the home. If I plug in 50 computers, another 100 mobile phones, is that too much?
A general rule of thumb would be for appliances, we use the wall outlets to really minimize the use of extension cords and outlets.
Yeah, Benedict, you're telling us earlier that besides unattended cooking, electrical fires are top of the list as well, right?
That's right, yes.
Why does that happen so often? Is it because we are overloading our sockets?
So overloading is one of the issues as well. The other one is, as I mentioned just now, if you don't get the qualified electricians to do the wiring, there may be some issues with the terminations or whatever, which cause overheating. Of course, there are also faulty electrical appliances or unapproved equipment like chargers and all. A lot of them buy chargers of third-party chargers and all. And some of these extension cords do not have the standard mark, which is again inferior quality. And also the protective device, the circuit breakers are actually not functioning properly. So these are the main issues that we have that causes a fire with electrical origins. Yeah.
So what can we do then? Because it sounds like we can't get rid of all the cheaper alternatives, the fake batteries, the fake wires and all that. People will still use them. Is there a way to use them safely?
Basically, I would say that although we have intention to buy the genuine product, but online sometimes you get a fake product which we don't even know about it. So the best way is actually to make sure that your protective device are working, so that in case anything happens, you will trip the device and cut off the power supply to prevent the fire.
You say a protective device, You mean like the circuit breaker?
That's right.
But even if I'm charging my mobile phone through an extension cord, is there another way? How would I know whether that is protected?
Normally, because you go back to the main, right? The main has all these circuit breakers up there. And if it's overheated, the MCB will trip, the main circuit breaker will trip. And there's an earth fault, the RCD will trip, which is the residual current breaker, yeah.
So that should happen?
Yeah, it should happen. But most of us who move in the house, many of us do not test it regularly, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Actually, yeah.
So you don't know whether it works or not, yeah.
You move into a new flat, you assume that everything's been done and taken care of, right?
Yeah.
So are you saying we should do otherwise?
Actually, we should do a testing at least, once every 6 months or so. Just trip the breaker and see whether it works, yeah.
How do we do that again?
For example, the RCD, there's a test button. You just press the test button to make sure that it trips. That's the earth leakage protection, yeah. So whenever there's earth leakage, it should trip.
Okay, because I understand also there are still some flats in Singapore that have very old electrical systems. They were not upgraded. Some of the cases of fires have been occurring at those places. Teck Meng, you brought up another point earlier about how very often some people do have too many things at home. There are some hoarders as well.
My charity, we serve the lowest income group, usually a one-room flat, and we are talking about people with multiple problems, sometimes dysfunctionality, mental problems and stuff like that. So a lot of these folks could be hoarders and what have you. So it's extremely difficult to try to educate them and to help them because, for example, the personal mobile devices, we have noticed that a lot of the elderly all of a sudden have some type of personal mobile devices that look very strange, and some of them are very huge. They went to modify it with extra battery or something like that, and you can imagine that many of it will not be the kind of approved type. And when they charge such things in their very, very cluttered homes, I'm afraid that even if there's a circuit breaker and all that, and your battery catch fire first, whether you're a circuit breaker or not, the fire will catch on. That's a key problem there.
Right. So do you feel that this group of people are even more vulnerable to such fires?
Yes, absolutely. Unattended fire is already one major thing that we are worried about. And actually alongside with that will be things like gas stoves that are not turned off, because some of the elderly have dementia or Alzheimer, so they could do stuff like that, and plus the cluttering and all that. So these are very serious safety hazards. So this is the reason why one of our regular activity is to move in to attempt to help them clean up the place, to declutter all the junk, and also at the same time keep encouraging and persuading them not to put 1,000,001 plugs onto one socket, and try to help them be more safety conscious. But it is a pretty uphill task. It needs a lot of patience.
Hello, my name is Steve Lai.
And I'm Teresa Tang.
And we are the hosts of CNA Correspondent,
a podcast that takes you to the heart of the work our correspondents do across the globe.
From China's COVID response,
to the childcare center massacre in Thailand,
from the fall of Najib Razak,
to the rise of Anwar Ibrahim as Malaysia's prime minister.
We speak to the people at the reporting front lines.
So, if you want to know how the biggest global stories unfold,
make sure you follow or subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts.
One of the concerns also is about hoarding, right? In a typical home now, even my furniture, my mattress, all those are highly combustible items. Teck Meng, you're saying some homes have way too many things, right? And that, I'm sure, is a fire safety hazard too.
Absolutely. This is the reason why we need to help the hoarders, because of two reasons. One is hygiene. It depends. There are all kinds of different type of hoarders. Some hoarders will have some psychological issue. For example, there's this lady I know, she only hoard things that are circular in shape. So she will go find things that are wheels or something that's round. If she cannot find anything that's circular, she will use plastic and make a loop. And so her whole house is filled with circular thing. Another hoarder I know, somehow the fellow just hoard real estate brochures. So the whole house is filled with all the junk mail. Yeah, it's very strange. And then some people will have newspaper. But generally speaking, most hoarders are just like junk collector. They just collect all kinds of things, and a lot of them are combustible.
Why is it so hard to clear these things from their homes?
It's a very tough thing to do because hoarding is a very big topic. You can persuade them not to bring things back. The problem is not the hoarding, the problem is the getting rid of stuff. You may persuade them not to bring things back, but in order to clean their house, you want to remove the item. Now that's where the problem is, because they will not be willing to. Because to you, these things look like junk. To them, they are like treasures, and somehow they perceive them to be something that they really need to have.
This issue of hoarding has been discussed even in Parliament before. I think many MPs have tried to address it.
Yeah.
Since we know it is a danger and a hazard, if we made it illegal to hoard or to block your corridor or your doorway, would that do anything to solve this problem?
Yeah, I'm a little bit old school on this, so I do believe in strict legislation, because the problem with the hoarders is not just his house, but the neighbors as well. It's quite a terrible thing to have a neighbor who is a hoarder, because it affects your own living condition. Cockroaches and all that will come to your house, and the property price of your unit will fall like a stone, because anybody who is interested to buy your unit walk by and say, wow, you have a neighbor from hell kind of thing. And of course, most importantly, safety. And when hoarders block the whole corridor with their belongings, and if there's a fire and all that, and people can really get into serious problem. So when it comes to that, I do believe that very strict enforcement of legislation and laws are needed. At this point in time, our observation is that the authorities are very careful. They don't want to just evict anyone easily. And so therefore, hoarders who receive a lot of complaints from neighbors and all that, they take a long time to keep talking to them over and over again. And it could take years, before any drastic action is taken. So therefore, some of the places we service and help, you can see that the corridors are just filled with all kinds of junk and furniture.
Okay.
It's quite strange, yeah.
I guess maybe it's the point where do you draw the line. If it's out in the corridor, in my opinion, they should have the right to just take it away. But if it's in my own home, then it's true. Who are you to tell me how I should live within my own home? Benedict, I'll come to you. In the association, is this an issue, as these are all fire safety hazards, right?
Yeah, all these are fire safety hazards. Actually, it's very difficult to enforce. But along the common corridor in HDB estates, I would advise the resident to actually approach the town councils, see how we can do it amicably, in terms of getting rid of the common corridor items, because there have been a few fires because of the items along the corridors, and it also obstruct the escape routes as well. So all these are very critical. We have to remove them. And within the house, it's a bit difficult to enforce because we have our own habits and all that. I would also advise that even whether it's a private residential estate or HDB, to work with the grassroots, because they can actually try to help in mediation and all that. It comes in very handy. I mean, you have the neighborhood committee or the RLCs, or even the C2E, the Community Emergency and Engagement Committee, which is in charge of fire safety and all. So they can actually help in all this area to even liaise with the agencies or town councils or wherever to help. Yeah.
If we each knew or took responsibility on our own, then I guess to be considerate and to think of the safety of others as well. But that's a very difficult task. KZ, I mean, do you think technology can play a bigger role in helping keep us safe? Some argue maybe we can, I don't know, isn't there more technology we can design into our buildings to keep them safer from fires?
Sensors at home would help to detect early detection of possible smoke that's generated due to possible fires that's going to come out. Could help.
Yeah, but smoke detectors, we've just made it mandatory, but that's only from homes built as of 2018 onwards. So if it's that big a concern, why didn't we make it mandatory for everyone?
Anything that's mandatory, the authorities are careful with. Yeah, they don't want to have a blanket statement for everything. But for me, you really do draw the line with public safety. Exactly as Stephen said earlier, I have no idea why objects left on common corridor can be allowed for so many years in some estates. Seriously, some people even have a kind of mini gym in the common area that belong to them. They just make use of the place, they put up sofa and all that. It's as if it's an extension of their home. But that's public area. Anything that involves public safety, my opinion is they ought to be a lot more strict. When you talk about office, right, in office building, the fire escape stairwell and all that, if they do a spot check on you and they found objects there, they're going to fine you, It's quite serious. But when it comes to private residential, till now, my observation is I think a lot more can be done, especially common area. Now, of course, behind closed door in your own private thing, that's another matter altogether. That's a lot harder. But at least that common area should be cleared. And the fire safety standards are very clear, you must have a clear walkway.
Teck Meng, you raised a good point actually. We're so strict with fire safety when it comes to our commercial buildings.
Yes.
But yet we're miles away in the other respect when it comes to our own homes.
Yes.
Benedict, why is that the case? Why do you think?
I would say that probably the government is giving us a leeway because we are in charge of our own home in that sense, right? So in that case, we will probably have to be responsible for our own safety and all.
Well, but when your home burns, my home could burn too.
Okay, if you say that, yes and no, because our buildings are built in such a way that, for example, a flat, HDB flat, they are all compartmentalized. So in other words, by right, it should not spread to the next unit. It should not, unless it's spread through the curtains and whatever, like the common area, it's spread to common area that is spread. But right, every unit is compartmentalized, so it should not affect the next neighbor.
But surely that's not a very good reason for not being strict about fire safety.
We have to be responsible for our own safety. For a commercial or industrial building, it's different because it's community, right? There's a lot of people in the office, in the factory also.
Okay, maybe I ask you, if you had a wish list, what would you like to see implemented in our homes right now to keep us safe from fires? What would be perhaps 2 things that you think we should change? KZ, you want to go first?
Yeah, I would say have more sensors. Types of sensors to be able to detect and protect, especially the vulnerable ones among us, our elderly parents while we are not at home and things like that. Yeah.
What kind of sensors are we talking about? Like smoke alarms?
Smoke alarms, motion sensors, or to detect abnormal activities while we are not at home.
Okay. Benedict?
Personally, I think we start from the basic. Every house should have a fire extinguisher, fire blanket. When you talk about unattended cooking, there's a fire, you need a fire blanket to cover it, which most of us do not have. Then, of course, the home fire alarm device, which is the smoke detector. Because a lot of people are succumbed by smoke and not fire when they are asleep in the night. You sit in the aircon room, it's still cool in your room, but the living room is already on fire. So that's how it beeps and wakes you up, Yeah, that's the whole idea, right? These are the things that I would like to see that, everyone is having it. In fact, the grassroots and even the National Fire and Emergency Preparedness Council, the FSMAS, is all already encouraging people, educating the public to have that.
And those we could quite easily buy online. A fire blanket, extinguisher, and a smoke alarm.
In fact, sometimes during events they give for free.
Yeah.
Oh, it's important actually. It's really important because let's say overheating fire, in the kitchen, whatever, you can just cover it.
Yeah, because we shouldn't be throwing water on it. That is something many of us may forget. Teck Meng, what do you think? What would you like to change?
I think that anything that affects other people, you should have very strict laws against it. When the hoarder's action affect the neighbors in safety and in hygiene, I do believe that the strict laws should be enforced. Now, earlier you asked the question why this is allowed compared to commercial building. My observation is that the authorities are very careful when it comes to personal lives and public opinion and stuff like that. They don't want to be seen to be bullying or being very harsh on, especially the lower income group of people, which is understandable. However, really, when it crosses a safety line, I think that is non-negotiable. Straight away, if I see stuff on the balcony or the corridor that is going to become a fire hazard, I'm going to give you a warning and say, please remove it by this date. If you don't do it, we will move in and remove it immediately. This we do not see happening because they will keep persuading and on go. So there are many cases that we have encountered where the thing has been there like forever. That's not something that is doable. You just simply need to go and do something about it. And within the household itself, if your hoarding behavior causes a very clear threat to your neighbor in terms of fire hazard and even hygiene, again, I do believe stricter laws should be enforced. Yeah. At this point of time, you will be surprised, the laws do not allow, for example, the police to just go into your house and to enforce whatever. So they are very mindful and respectful of your privacy. But like I said, once it crosses a certain red line, I do believe we need to be more careful.
Yeah, and it's a good point. Once safety is at stake, then we shouldn't be taking the risk. You just need that one time for it to happen and lives could be lost.
It is.
And if we think about it, like Benedict's point of fire extinguishers and blankets, why not just buy one and give it to every household? We are a fairly rich country, and that is one of the perks that we can perhaps ride on to keep our people safe. So maybe they'll do it closer to the elections. Who knows? All right, gentlemen, but thanks so much for sharing with us. Just want to tell folks, because many of us have seen fires on TV, but of course it's not the same. And I encountered this when I worked on an episode of Talking Point where we tested these fires in a facility, and I saw how fast it could and quickly it could spread. Within 2 minutes, the entire room was ablaze. And when you see that, then it becomes really scary because fires do kill people. And also firefighters risk their lives daily to keep us safe from these fires. And not too long ago, we unfortunately had the tragedy of a young national serviceman dying because he was trying to put out a fire. So thank you, gentlemen, for sharing your insights with us. We hope this discussion has also shed light for those of you who are listening in on how our behaviors can be dangerous, our own behaviors, not just to us, but to those around us too. So just remember that scented candle may seem nice at home, but if you leave it unattended, it is possibly another fire waiting to happen. So do bear that in mind. I want to thank my guests for taking the time to give us their views, and to the team behind this episode, Jacqueline Chan, Joanne Chan, Sai Luin, and Crispina Robert. And I'm Stephen Chia signing off. I'll see you next week.